Welcome to the last presentation of this year's C4 convention. We are here this hour with Leo Shane talking about continental currency. So a little bit of a different take on the colonial area from all the coins that we've heard about this weekend. So Leo Shane has been collecting coins for over 60 years. So he's been in the industry for quite a while. And he is also now the librarian for C4. So if you have ever worked with the lending library that Jim mentioned last hour, then you've worked with Leo before. So I will turn it over to you and let's get started.
Okay, well, thank you, Leanna. And thank you everybody for attending this presentation this afternoon. Welcome. The title of the presentation is Continental Currency, Patriotism in Print. I've had a great time just putting this presentation together. I've really enjoyed it, and I hope you also enjoy the presentation and the things that I have to say. One thing I do want to mention at the beginning is that I have invited some people who are not C4 members. So if I explain things a little more detail sometimes, it's because I know there are a couple people on here who are not coin collectors, and I just want to make sure I don't leave them behind. Okay. So with that, let me move ahead. Oops. There we go. Okay. So continental currency, patriotism in print is the subject. I want to give a little overview of continental currency to start with. Authorized by the Second Continental Congress in 1775, they were issued for 4 years till 1779. They were denominated in Spanish dollars, six British shillings to the Spanish dollar. It was basically issued to finance the war with Great Britain. May of 75 was just after Lexington and Concord, which I guess is the recognized official beginning of the Revolutionary War. So this is why they were printed and made. There was no precious metal backing, but there was a promise that they would pay the money for these issues out of future taxes and from property and land seized from Tories that they hope to get and sell their land and pay for the backing of these issues. Extensively counterfeited, and the vignettes are what I'm going to talk about mostly today. And they were, as we'll see, they were patriotism in print. First of all, just a little bit more of an overview. The denominations, as you can see across the top of the chart, 1/6 of a dollar all the way up to $80. Okay, now 1/6 of a dollar, 1/6, 1/3, 1/2, and 2/3 were really made to make change for a dollar. If it was 6 shillings to the dollar, 1/6 was 1 shilling. 1/3 was 2 shillings, 1/2, 3 shillings, and 2/3, 4 shillings. So that's pretty much why the odd denominations there. The other ones on the other side of the chart, beginning with $35 to 80, really were there because of depreciation of the continental currency. They later became almost worthless at the end, which we'll talk about, but they needed bigger denominations. The ones in the middle, 1 through 30, there's been a couple reasons that I've found. I don't know how much any of them are true. But one of them was just because they had so much to issue in dollars and they wanted to fit it onto a page and make those dollars with using least amount of paper. That could be a possibility. The other reason why they might be using that is I heard that when they were paying the soldiers, if you were owed, say, $22, rather than give you a 20 and 2 ones, they wanted to use the least amount of paper, so they would only have to give you 2 pieces of paper for 20 and a $2 bill. So those two are a little weaker than the first 2 explanations, but I'm not sure. But it is kind of odd that they would do 1 through 8, 20, and 30. So it could be either of them or some combination. I also want to mention down the left-hand side here, these are the issue dates of continental currency. And the reason that some of them are different colors, first of all, the ones in blue, I'm sorry. Okay, let me go back for a minute. All of the obverses, all of the fronts of all continental currency had the same vignette. They may have formatted things a little differently, but the same design, the same vignette was kept all the way through. So like in the $5 bill, it was all the same all the way from the May 75 issue to the January 79 issue, okay? So the obverses were always the same for that denomination, okay? On the left-hand side, the reverses are coded in 3 colors because the first several were all of the same back reverse design. And then they changed the reverse designs in April of 1778. The yellow ones, they kept that for September 1778. And then they changed it again in January 79. So there's really 3, in the case of say the $5 bill, there's 3 reverses you can get, but there's only 1 obverse because it's all the same, okay? Where it's black, there were no, that denomination was not printed for that year or for that issue. And so that's just an overview. Now we are just delighted to have an actual picture of a colonial printer printing Continental currency from the 18th century. Not sure how this picture survived, but there it is. There it is. This survived. So just amazing that I found that. That's just me, actually. So in case you want to know, that's just me printing some money at Colonial Williamsburg on an actual 18th century press. So it was a printer printing money on the press. So that's what that's all about. I'm not going to go through this. Don't get scared by these presentations or by these slides. I'm not going to go through all of these lines and everything and go through that. But I did want to mention the French and Indian War that we know it as, the 7 Years' War as they know it in England. Okay, basically, it started in 1754 and it ended in 1763. Okay, now one of the things that came out of that was that after the war, the British won. They beat the French. Their territory in northern North America became vast. It was just a much bigger. They more than doubled the size of their holdings. They also came out with a massive debt, okay, a national debt, which was spectacular. So what do you think they did? Well, they looked at North America and they said, you know, they ought to pay for some of this war. So they started doing things like the Sugar Act, the Stamp Act, and some other things. The Stamp Act, tax on papers, it was also tax on dice and playing cards. And in some instances, it was as much as 10 shillings on a pair of dice. That's a lot of money in those times, believe me. Things like the Quartering Act, where the colonies must provide housing for British troops were there. Let's see, I just want to move something here. Okay. Parliament, okay, we met, we looked at the Stamp Act, we got it repealed by Parliament, but then they fired back and said, but we're going to still assert our power over you. So basically they put in an act which reiterates their authority over the colonies. Boston responded. A lot of Boston merchants agreed not to import British goods or to sell to the British. British turn around, occupy Boston. And then you have things like the Golden Hill is actually a part of New York City. Today it's part of New York City in the financial district. Then it was just north of the city. There was a hill there. And there was a riot, basically. It was actually the first bloodshed of the American Revolution, even before Lexington and Concord, where British soldiers and the Sons of Liberty clashed and people died there. So next we had things like the Boston Massacre, which we all know about, Gasp Affair, where a ship ran aground and local mobs burned it and took all the cargo. Boston Tea Party, which we're aware of. British come along and close the port of Boston and occupy the port. Administrative justice of government. 2 of the intolerable acts. Basically, they were interesting in that the Administration of Justice Act, and I have a note here. I'm sorry. It replaced local officials with local elected officials with government royal appointees. Okay, so that would anger anybody pretty quickly. And then the Massachusetts Government Act allowed British officials, if they were tried for something or they did something wrong, they could decide to go to England to be tried or they could go find another colony which was more favorable to them and go be tried. So again, these are pretty much things that will get people riled up. First Continental Congress meets in September, October of '74, and they look at things. What are we going to do about this? How do we react? Patrick Henry gives his speech in Richmond, "Give me liberty and give me death," or "Give me death," because he was obviously on the extreme side of wanting war and go ahead. And then of course we have Paul Revere's ride, the Battle of Lexington, and the first shots of the war that we recognize now officially. Okay, so right after that, Lexington and Concord, you have the Second Continental Congress convenes in Philadelphia, May 10th, 1775. One of the things that they did was they authorized the printing of continental currency. And it was $1 of continental currency was equal to $1 of Spain, one Spanish dollar. Okay. Before I go any further with talking about these individual things, I just want to let you know the vignettes, the description of the vignettes come out of Newman's early American money book, and the interpretations, which are usually the third point down here, they come out of some contemporary or close to contemporary, early 1800s and mid 1800s. Some people have published things to actually talk about what these vignettes meant, and they were the closest they could get to finding out what these vignettes represented. Because when you look at them, you might have a little different idea what they were intended to be, and I'll talk about those too. So the first one is the weighted bowl on an acanthus plant. Okay, and I'm going to, if I do this right, whoops, I don't want to do that. We go in and we can zoom in. I thought we could. There we go. Okay, so here is the acanthus plant down here, and this is the weighted bowl. Okay, from that, so you can get an idea. And then I'm not going to read the Latin because it's just a little over my head here. But what this was an encouragement to the struggling colonists. Yes, we're oppressed right now. Yes, we're crushed. Yes, we are having more regulations put on us, and they're closing our ports and everything. But we will not be destroyed. We will survive this. So there, the Latin inscription basically translates to, "Though crushed, it recovers." So we recover. We actually see this same thing on many. We actually see this on many columns in buildings today. This is the acanthus plant down here, and I guess this is a bowl. This is usually the top, the capital of the pillar. I don't know that that's supposed to represent a bowl, but it sure does look like what's on this dollar bill here. So that's first patriotic thought. Though we're being crushed, though we're being oppressed, we will recover. Okay. Second vignette is a grain being thrashed by a flail. Okay, let's see if we can do this again. So pretty straightforward. It's grain. There's a flail and everything. It's pretty straightforward there. Even though the colonists were enduring a lot of trials and tribulations and suffering blows, just like a flail, you bring out the grain, you bring out the good in flailing wheat or whatever plant it is to get the grain. So basically, the inscription reads, "Affliction improves it." It's kind of like what doesn't kill us makes us better. Okay, that's kind of about the message here for this one. So again, another patriotic thing. This one I kind of like. It's I like them all, but I kind of like this one a little bit more than some of the others. Okay, so we have an eagle. Okay, who is England? They're a stronger bird. They're a predator, whatever. United States, or the United Colonies at the time, is a heron. Okay, but the heron has a very sharp beak, and it actually hurts the eagle when just out of self-defense. So just because of the crane, or I'm sorry, it's a crane. I've heard a heron also. Just because it's inferior, it's not as strong. Out of self-preservation, it can hurt the eagle, Great Britain. So they're saying basically, don't worry that we're not the stronger bird right now. The outcome is in doubt, and we hope to prevail. On the $4 bill, these are all the first issues that were printed. On the $4 bill, we have a boar running into a spear. Okay, doesn't look very intelligent in a way, but basically, boars are very, very courageous. They will do anything to defend themselves. Anybody who has ever boar hunted, and I have not been, but I understand they are just all in, you might say. They will do anything to avoid being hurt or being killed or whatever. So the boar is us being run in. We would rather prefer death to involuntary slavery. So either a death or an honorable life. Excuse me. And that's kind of, it also implies something, Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death by Patrick Henry, that he was speaking to the Virginia Convention in March of 1775. So that's kind of the same idea. And the fifth $5 bill. Okay, kind of an interesting vignette. We have a thorn bush. We have a hand there trying to grab it, and the hand is bleeding. There's some drops of blood there. Okay. The thorn bush is really America. The hand is Great Britain, and it's trying to crush us. It's trying to basically keep control of us or whatever. But we're doing whatever we can to preserve our way of life, to preserve ourselves. Okay, and that's where we have thorns. We are going to inflict some pain if they continue to try to crush us. So we're going to survive or we give up. Okay, that's the message there. Be ready to sacrifice what you have to in order to survive and to keep our country intact. Excuse me a minute. Okay. On the $6 bill, oops, on the $6 bill, kind of an interesting one. This one's a little tougher to see. I couldn't get a better picture. This is a beaver here, okay? And he's gnawing on a palm tree, okay? And it's preservatio or whatever that, however you want to pronounce that. Okay. The tree represents Britain. It's strong, overshadowing. The beaver symbolizes America, determined but steady, persevering, resistance to be cut off from the realm. So persevere. We're persevering. We must persevere if we're to cut off and create our own new nation. So by perseverance, that's what's going to happen here. It will not be quick. It will be something that's going to take us a while to do, but we will prevail in the end. Okay, $7 bill. Oh, before I do anything else, put a note here. I'm going to show you that. Let me see. Okay, so the date on this is July 1776, but just note this is like the second issue because it was originally issued on May the 10th, 1775, the first printing of it. You'll notice up here, it says the United Colonies. So even at this date, July of 1776. We were calling ourselves the United Colonies, not the United States. Okay, so that's kind of an interesting part. And I'll show you where it changed later on in the presentation. This presentation, basically, it's a storm, and this is the land. So there's a great storm putting a lot of rain on the land, the fields and the mountains and everything. Okay, severe storm pouring rain on the earth. Okay, it's addressed to the people who were dejected. They felt like there was little hope for the future, and you know, everything. It rained. It was a storm. It was kind of gloomy, but bright skies are in the future. So it's basically encouraging people to be calm right now. It will be calm in the future. Things will be okay. Okay. Let me go to an $8 bill. So what this has is a harp with different size strings, and it's held together by the harp itself. Okay, the strings represents the small and the large colonies, and the harp is the framework, the strong frame that holds it together. So, I mean, the message really is the large and the small colonies, different sizes, different places. We have to be in harmony if we're to survive. It's kind of like the flags that came out around that era, unite or die. You got to remember that during this era, 13 colonies felt like they were 13 countries. In fact, if you asked somebody at this time what country you belong to, they would not have said the United States or even the United Colonies. They probably still would have said, I come from Virginia, or I come from Pennsylvania. They were their countries. We were not united yet, but we hoped to. But there was still a lot of differences and a lot of cultures and everything to blend together to make one nation. But we had to do this if we were to survive. We had to unite to survive, and the small or large, we had to work together. Okay, this is first thing I want to mention here is that this on the left side here is this marbleized paper. Benjamin Franklin came back from England in May of 1775, and he brought back with him some paper, different sheets of paper, and it had this marbleized type design on the side. It's used for anti-counterfeiting. You can imagine something like this trying to be counterfeited by somebody. It's a kind of a long and difficult process to get this marbleized paper. We did not have the expertise to do that here in the United States or the United Colonies at the time. But we used this paper, what we could, on this $20 bill. Okay, so the vignette is a strong wind creating waves. Let me see if I can get this. It's a little difficult to see, but this is the best you can do. These are very difficult to find, these bills and everything, and they're very, very hard to get pictures of it. This is a face right here, and it's blowing wind across the land, and it's creating waves. Okay, so that's that. I think I have another picture later on that might be a little bit better than this, but okay, this is okay. So the British is the external force. There's an external force blowing, okay, causing us problems, and that's making us rebel. The waves are rebellion or insurrection and everything. So you know, we're driven by the force of the British, really pushing us into doing things and rebelling and so forth, and you know, dumping tea and all that kind of stuff. So it's all we're blaming the British for this as an external force that's pushing us to be an insurrection here. Just kind of a little divergent. I said most of the backs had different kind of prints and did not have vignettes on them. There are a couple exceptions. Most of the backs or the reverses of the dollars would have something like this. It's called a nature print. It was invented by Ben Franklin. It was an anti-counterfeiting method. He actually did an impression of a leaf of different trees, and there are different kinds on the different bills. And some of in 2014, one of his impressions was found. One of his plaster casts was found. Very, very difficult to counterfeit something like this because it's such of an intricate design. So that's what's on a lot of them. But on the $20 bill, at least for the first issue, the reverse was this. Actually had a patriotic vignette. Again, a little difficult to see, but a sun shining and ships. Here's one here on a nice calm ocean or sea. The boats on a calm sea are a symbol of security, tranquility, whatever. The sun is a symbol of harmony and tranquility. We all feel when the sun comes out, things are nicer than when it rains. We feel a little bit on edge, I guess you might say. So again, patriotic thought here. When the storm dies down, we will rest. Okay. When this all happens, things will be better, and just encouragement as to that. Things will be better. So now we go to the $30. Okay, these are all still the first issues that were issued in May of 1775. Okay, these are all the ones that were the denominations that were first issued then. Okay, vignette is a wreath on a monument or an altar. Actually, it says here on a tomb. Okay, circular shape of wreath represents eternity. Ancient Rome, the wreath was victory. You see Caesar with the wreaths on his head and so forth. That was something there. If you act courageously or if you act righteously, you will be honored in death. Let me just zoom in on this one. The wreath, and there's your altar. Pretty straightforward. When I think of this, I think of people like John Hancock, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, Alexander Hamilton, Betsy Ross, whatever. But the person I really think of, the main person, is George Washington. Just think about how revered George Washington was. He was the father of the country. He acted righteously. He did everything that we could possibly have asked for him. And now we honor him even today. 200 and some years later, we honor him for all that he's done for the country. So if you act righteously, you will be honored after death. The back of the $30 bill was a little, I don't know if they got lazy or what, but basically, these are the same things that we saw before. Here's the wind blowing and causing the waves that we saw on the $20 bill. Here's the back of the $20 bill with the two ships on a sea and the sun is out. So it's nothing new there. I'm not sure why they didn't come up with something better. They forgot, they didn't have any more ideas, or they just got lazy. So that's basically where that one stands. Okay, let me see something. Okay, so going to talk a little bit about timeline again. So that was the first issue that came out in May of 1775. So what happens after that? Okay. In June, George Washington is appointed commander-in-chief. You had the Battle of Bunker Hill, or Breed's Hill. George Washington assumes command outside of Boston. Olive Branch petitions, which was the final attempt to avoid a war with Britain. Up to that point, we were asking Britain to please respond, please do something, lighten our load or whatever, and we got rejected all the time. So this was the last attempt, July of 1775. We established a navy after that. You'll see a lot of things here. Siege of 96, I'm sorry, Siege of 96, South Carolina. You'll see a lot of this where it's American Whigs, basically the Patriots or whatever, the rebels fighting the British loyalists. This was not the British regulars fighting. This was basically kind of a civil war, okay, between the loyalists and the Patriots. Battle of Montreal, we take that without opposition. Virginia, again, here's a militia victory, leads to the departure of the governor. We basically chased the governor of Virginia out at this point in December 75. More things in South Carolina. Loyalists capture South Carolina militia, or yes, militia. Snow campaign, Richard Rogers, not to go through all these. Thomas Paine, okay, in January 1776, Common Sense. Okay, what was Common Sense? Basically, Common Sense was a pamphlet, basically, that talked about why we should be independent. Okay, why should we pull away from the British and everything? Why should we establish our own country? Also about this time in January 1776, the British started to counterfeit money aboard the gunboat, the HMS Phoenix in New York Harbor. Okay, there's ships in the harbor and everything. British are occupying New York, and they're they're counterfeiting money. They're basically trying to ruin our economy by counterfeiting money and passing it out to anybody who will take it, and basically use it to destroy our economy. This was one of the first times that anybody's ever tried that in war. And I know the Americans talked about it and said this was such a vile act because no one had ever done that before. And at this point in time, wars had some rules left. Okay, you were supposed to be honorable in what you were doing, and this was to be totally not honorable. So it was not something that was held in high regard by the Patriots. Okay, so now we have the Second Continental Congress comes along, and the first in February of 1776, and the continental currency is still trading at about $1 for the Spanish dollar, so it was equal. It hadn't been depreciated yet. So this is where they decided they needed to put in some fractional money, a sixth of a dollar, a third of a dollar, half, and 2/3, to represent shillings, the number of shillings. So this is one of my favorites because Jim Glickman mentioned in the presentation before about the Fugio cent. And this was actually the predecessor of the Fugio cent. Okay, that was in 1778. This was 1776. I'm sorry, that was 1787. This was 1786. Sun shining on a sundial. Word Fugio, which means I fly or to fly, and mind your business. Now, not mind your own business, mind your business. Okay, in other words, be industrious. So translation basically is time flies, so mind your business. Okay, in other words, time is short, be industrious. Okay, and this is one of the moralisms that Benjamin Franklin came up with. I think it's apropos today as it was then. On the back of these prints was a chain with the 13 colonies. Excuse me. 13 colonies, basically. And they have in a ring, united together, has all the different colony names. American Congress, and then we are one. Okay, again, trying to promote the idea that we must be together as one nation. We must come together. We are not 13 individual countries anymore, but we are one nation. And this is the only way we're going to survive. Okay. Okay, so more timeline here. Okay, so now March 76. Okay, British evacuate Boston after I forget the name of the hill that we were on outside of Boston, but it'll come to me in a minute. Halifax resolves. That's not Nova Scotia; it's Halifax, North Carolina. Was the first colony to authorize its delegates to vote for independence. Okay, Lee's resolution proposes independence at Second Continental Congress. In July, we declare our independence. August, Battle of Brooklyn, where we tried to hold on to Brooklyn and were basically routed, where we fled to Manhattan. Then in Manhattan, our troops were basically disorganized and we deserted Manhattan in a way. We went to the Battle of Fort Washington, which was really in Manhattan today, on the upper left side, on the upper Hudson River side. And basically we were pushed across the river and just barely escaped the British coming in. It's also in September, Nathan Hale, a spy for George Washington, was hanged. I believe he was hanged, not shot, for spying on the British. Okay, not a good time for the United States at this point, or or for the American people at this point. The British march right across New Jersey, and Congress worries that they're going to go right into Philadelphia, so they move to Baltimore. Okay, so then they have the Second Continental Congress, Session 2, they call it, because they moved to a different place. So they were fearful that they were going to come right down New Jersey and right into Philadelphia. They didn't, but I'll talk about that. In the meantime, they had a strong stranglehold on New York, on the New York colony and the New York City. William Tyrone, the last governor of New York, he has an operation aboard another ship, the Duchess of Gordon, in New York Harbor. So now they're counterfeiting a couple different ways. I know it was said in some of the readings that I had that William Tyrone would go to that ship every so often and get a bunch of money. And he personally went there a few times, got a bunch of money, and would bring it back. Okay, and then spend it again, trying to disrupt our economy. Thomas Paine publishes The American Crisis. Basically, this is a series of pamphlets that talk about why the people should rebel. I'm sorry, I got to get my notes here. Okay, why we should rebel against, and we should be separate from the British. Battle of Trenton, we all know. Christmas Day, when Washington's crossing occurred, went to Trenton. A decisive battle and a turning point. A few days later at Princeton, really a turning point for the war for us, because up to that point, things looked really bad. There were desertions. There was no pay for the troops. Everything was very bleak at the time. Continental Congress winners in Morristown later on, after these battles. Second Continental Congress returns to Philadelphia after we realized that the British were not going to come across New Jersey and take over Philadelphia. The flag resolution occurs. We finally have a flag with 13 stars and red and white stripes. Fort Ticonderoga, the British capture that. Battle of Saratoga. Paoli is basically a suburb of Philadelphia as the British start to march at this point into Philadelphia, and they occupy it in September 26, 1777. Battle of Paoli was leading up to that. Congress moves to Lancaster and then to Yorktown. I don't know if anybody knows the topography of the area, but at this point, Lancaster is across the Susquehanna River from Yorktown. It's now called York, PA. It's a very, very, very broad but shallow river. It is just populated with rocks. You can almost walk across it, but you obviously can't get a boat across it. And it's just a very wide area, an open area. So originally they were on the east side, which was York, and then, Lancaster. And then they moved to York, which is on the west side of the river. Any troops that were coming in that area would have extreme amount of difficulty crossing that river. You can still see that today when you go in that area. So it was a strategic move just to keep the troops safe from any kind of British attack. Battle of Germantown. Germantown is now actually part of Philadelphia. So again, it was part of this, the whole area of the British occupying Philadelphia. Battle of Saratoga comes in. Let's see, what else do we have here? Fort Mifflin's on the Delaware. Again, part of Philadelphia at this point, or not at this point now, but at this point it was on the outskirts of it. And talk about just a couple more things. White Marsh is outside of Philadelphia. December 1777, British Washington takes his troops to Valley Forge. Baron von Steuben trains the soldiers in military discipline and so forth. France and the United States sign the Treaty of Amity and the Treaty of Alliance. Basically, they recognized us finally as a nation, and they promoted trade between us. So we had recognition by France as wanting to be on our side and wanting to help us. General Howe had always had I guess, an affinity for the colonies, or somewhat of an affinity. He really did not like the idea of fighting against British subjects. He felt the Americans were British subjects, and he did not like the idea. And I guess that kind of showed up in some of the things he did or didn't do. And finally, the patience with the Parliament and the King, finally, it all caught up with him, and they replaced him here in 1778. Also, long feud of Britain and France. France still smarting from the French and Indian War, or the 7-Year War, comes into the fray of things, now declares war on Britain. And then another Continental Congress, Session 5, comes along. Continental currency now is about $2 to the Spanish dollar. So it's depreciated 50% at this point. So, okay, so now April of 1778. Okay, I just want to mention one thing right here. Now the board, as of May 1777, but I'm just showing it here because there was nothing new to be added in May 1777. But here is where we actually show the United States on the side. Okay, we go from United Colonies, United States, and it also says of North America, the United States of North America. Okay, this vignette is an all-seeing eye, 13 stars on a eternal flame, basically, is what it is, a pyre with an eternal flame. The translation of that, it's interesting to me to see how religious some of these things are, because we don't think of a lot of the colonial people as being religious, but they very much were. It's the shining eye of providence, surrounded on 13 stars, surrounding an altar with an eternal flame. So under the eye of God, basically, 13 states have formed a confederation and are finally coming together as a union, and they've laid their sacrifices upon a common altar. So that's what the confederation stands for. Oops. So I'll just do once again, just to zoom in on that. The eye of God, the 13 stars, the altar, and the eternal flame. Okay, so that was the only new one, the only new issue that was added at that point. So now let's go on to another issue here. Marquis de Lafayette has a small force, and he escapes from British forces at Battle of Baron Hill, which is not too far outside of Philadelphia. British abandoned Philadelphia in June of 78. Okay, they wanted to basically consolidate their forces up in the New York area, northern New Jersey area. That's where they had the largest amount of loyalists were up in there, and they had firm control over Philadelphia, of New York City. Philadelphia, they had a lot of allies there too, but not as much as New York. So after they leave, Congress returns. On their way up to New Jersey, Washington engages General Clinton as the British try to move north to consolidate their forces. Congress returns after the British leave. There's battles going on out in the West, where George Rogers Clark is doing different things, and again, these are more of loyalists versus patriots at this point. July 29th, French forces besiege Newport, Rhode Island. This is the first military engagement by French forces in the war. This is also our beloved Rhode Island ship tokens that we collect as collectors. This is what commemorates that battle. It was not a good battle for the American and French forces. And the Rhode Island ship token, I believe, is known to be made in England and minted there. So it was to commemorate their victory. Okay. September 78, another Continental Congress session. Okay. Now there's $4 needed of Continental currency to equal a Spanish dollar. It is now depreciated to 25 cents on the dollar, basically. So one of the things that they have to do is they have to start to get larger denominations, okay? Because now what a $20 bill was is now you need $80 or whatever to do that if it's a quarter of what it was just a few years ago. So, okay, the vignette is a pyramid, 13 levels representing unity, and it's an unfinished pyramid. Let me get into this. Okay, this over here is just overprint, so you can ignore that. It's not part of the design, but here's a pyramid that's unfinished. Basically, what we're saying is, here's the 13 states. We formed a union. We are now one. It's everlasting, but there's going to be additional states added on as we finish the pyramid to the top. Okay, so it's a patriotic thing that we are one, but there's more to come. $60 bill. The British are in firm control of New York, a lot of New Jersey, and other parts in different places. There's things going on in the South. There's a civil war. This is an encouragement, basically. The Confederation will survive, and it comes from a psalm, again, a biblical term here. The Lord reigns, let the earth be glad, let the distant shores rejoice. So here's the earth, and basically it's God reigns, let the earth rejoice. So not as ornate as some of the other things, just a globe with the inscription, but still a patriotic theme of where we are. Okay, so now after September 78, the British, there's been a lot of wars, a lot of skirmishes, a lot of battles going on up in the north, some in the south, but the British decide at this point we're not getting anywhere fast in the north. So, we'll still keep doing things, but our basic strategy is going to be to go after the southern ports. And we're going to enlist the loyalist militias to help us. Why should we fight all these battles? Let the loyalists help us. And there were a lot. And then we would move north to control one region after another. So that was their strategy after 1778. So many battles between 1779, 1782. This is called the First Civil War by many people because it was, in a lot of cases, some participation by British troops, but a lot of British loyalists versus patriots. There's also some things going on in the west and the northern area, but they were much less frequent. So the British capture Savannah, huge win for them in December 79. Okay, so now January 79, another Continental Congress session. Continental currency is now trading at $7.42 to the Spanish dollar. Okay, so it is really getting to be almost worthless. Okay, I don't know what that current comes out to be, but it's between 10 or 15%, 10 to 15 cents on the dollar, I think, somewhere there. So again, we start with some of the bigger denominations because we need them. This one is a little bit tough to see because they put this anti-counterfeit splasher. What they would do is they would print in one color and then they would put an overlay on and print in another color. Okay, and that's what they're doing here. But they have this odd design which kind of blurs the picture. It's just a picture of a plow in a field. Okay, that's what it is. It's not, this red really has nothing to do with it. It's just a way of trying to prevent counterfeits. Now, when I thought this, I looked at this and it says, a plow in a field. Hence our wealth is the interpretation of it. I thought, okay, well, it refers to, our wealth. We're an agricultural country, and, much of our economy is based on agriculture. And I guess that had something to do with it. But reading some of these other descriptions and everything, it has a little bit deeper meaning. And I think this is a good explanation. The blades of a plow break up the earth. It cuts it and turns the soil, so it's loose and ready for planting seeds. Okay, the seeds are planted for future harvest. So basically, what we're doing now with this revolution and creating a new country will yield a harvest sometime in the future. Again, a very patriotic thing. That's our wealth. Our wealth now is what we're planting for the future. So that, I think, is extremely patriotic thought. This is one of my favorites because I like bees. A beehive in a shed, a beehive protected by a shed. And let me show you that. Again, some of these red counterfeiting things distort the picture a little bit. Here's beehives, here's a shed, and these are tiny little bees flying around in there. So bees are actually used in a couple of the colonial currencies. Sometimes I know there's some in South Carolina, and there's some in New Jersey colonial print. And bees are known for being industrious. They also symbolize happiness. I haven't heard that lately, but evidently back then they were happiness. Also associated with improvement in life. So by our industry, frugality, whatever, we will prosper. So thus let the nation flourish. Okay, we are going to flourish. So be patient, and we will all get there. Again, this is during a period January 79 and a little later, where everything's at a standstill. We have a revolution going on in the South, a civil war in the South, basically, and we have a kind of a standstill in the northern colonies and everything, and skirmishes out in the West. Things don't look the greatest, but you know what? We got it. So the idea here was to encourage people during the darkest period of the revolution, encouragement for the struggling people, that the sun, in other words, peace and prosperity, will prevail. So don't get depressed. The dark clouds will fade away, will blow away. The sun will come out. Things will be good, and we will prosper again, and things will be the way we want them to be. A couple more we got here. A hand holding a balance. In the Declaration of Independence, the forefathers appealed to their British brethren. I believe there's some passages in there that they were still trying to be friendly with the British, but they wanted justice. So they were appealing to that. They were also appealing to the supreme judge for justice, being God. And this is the principle they wanted to be judged by. So they're saying basically, let justice be done. Okay, here's the hand of God, okay, holding up a scale. And this is what we want: justice, we want judgment, we want to live in peace, but we also have to have justice. We can't have what we're having now, which is oppression. A healthy tree standing alone. Okay, tree represents a confederacy, and it has withstood the storm for 4 years. So nothing more than a tree standing alone. Okay. The inscription: for 4 years it has withstood the force of the storm. So from 1775, when Lexington and Concord started, to January to 1779, it's roughly 4 years. We have withstood that. We've withstood all the trials and tribulations of war, and we're still here. And basically, we are going to be here. We are going to be here. There's no questions about that. And then the last one, the $80 bill, which is the largest dollar bill of all of them, basically is a tree standing alone, but it's a larger tree. Okay. And the tree is flourishing. The tree has grown a lot. It's now blossoming and everything. Is a prophecy basically saying the strength of the Union and perpetuity of the states as one great nation. We're going to be here. And I guess the prophecy worked, because 200 and some years later, we're still here. We are a strong country. We do have our problems and differences, but we are still a great nation. So that basically, it was a prophecy that we will be here. We will, down here, the Latin, and it will flourish for ages and ages. Well, so far so good, 200 and some years later. So I just want to kind of finish the story a little bit. So after 1779, Spain declares war on Great Britain. The British are still trying to counterfeit money and destroy the continental currency. There's a ship from, I think it was Glasgow to Glencairn, trying to go to New York City, and they found counterfeiting materials on that boat. American and French effort try to retake Savannah, no luck yet. Morristown encampment, somewhere around April 8, 1780. Now, they really did a job. Since there's no backing and a lot of counterfeits out there, continental currency, you need $40 to the continental currency to make one Spanish dollar. So it's worth about 2.5 cents to the dollar. Okay. It is getting to be just about worthless. Mutiny in May of 1780, Connecticut regiments in Morristown revolt. 1,500 officers, 1,500 soldiers mutiny. They were going to march on Philadelphia. They've killed 3 officers. One of their things was enlistments. They wanted to end their enlistments. They wanted to be over with this. The other thing is they didn't get paid, and when they did get paid, they got paid in continental currency, which again is almost worthless at this point at 2.5 cents on the dollar. So you were supposed to get $20 and you got $20 in continental currency, you got nothing. So that's what hurts. And that's why they mutinied. They did reach an agreement. They wanted to be paid in silver, and somehow we came up with some silver and paid them and so forth. And we calmed down the situation. French troops arrive in Newport, Rhode Island, signaling the beginning of the end for the Revolutionary War. And the British did repel us and the combined forces. Benedict Arnold basically becomes a traitor. John Andre is arrested for spying. Benedict Arnold flees to the British, and we don't see him again, except in a battle, I believe, or two. But we never did catch up with him and try him. Articles of Confederation, 1781. By May of 1781, continental currency basically is worthless, and it ceases to circulate. Okay, it ceases to circulate. There was actually some speculation going on, and at one point, I believe I read that they were trading it at $250 to the dollar. Okay, so it was essentially worthless, but some people were willing to buy it up just to speculate that maybe it would be worth something. And in fact, in 1790, there was a general agreement by the government. They would cash them in at 100 to 1. So it's 1 cent on the dollar. So they were darn near worthless, but maybe not absolutely worthless. So that May of 71, they really didn't circulate anymore. September, British defeat the French defeat British Navy. They control the Chesapeake. That sets up the siege of Yorktown. And basically that when our forces kind of came in from the west, pinned them against the sea where the French were, cut them off from their supply lines and everything, and Cornwallis had to surrender. So it was October of 1781. Netherlands recognizes our independence. British start to evacuate Savannah. This is when the period when everybody but the king kind of realized that the war was over, but the king held on. November 82, signed some articles of peace preliminary. British evacuate Charleston in 1782. In December, Charleston was, we don't hear too much about Charleston, but Charleston was actually the fourth largest city in the colonies, outside of Boston, Philadelphia, and New York. It was the capital of the South, basically the commercial capital of the South. But we don't hear as much about it, but it was an extremely important place. And if you ever want to go visit that, it is a spectacular place to go and do some touring. Treaty of Paris, 1783, British finally evacuate New York City. So we finally get them off the territory in November of 1783. December, Washington bids farewell to his office at Francis Tavern in New York City. Again, if you're in New York City and you want to go have lunch there, great place to be. And Washington resigns as commander in chief in Annapolis in 1783. So just want to mention a couple things. There was good and bad to Continental currency. It is a fun thing to collect. It's a lot of fun when you look at these vignettes and you look at what they mean and you think about them and you feel like, well, this is what these people were thinking then. So it's a neat series if you want to get into it. And they're fairly readily available in all kind of shapes and all kind of grades, so you can buy them cheaply or you can go for top notch and spend a lot of money too. So it's for any collector who has even a small budget. Bad part of them was many people were forced to accept them and they lost money. Okay, the farmer who had to supply supplies to the troops and everything, he was paid in Continental currency. Well, that currency became worthless and he got nothing for his goods and everything. Where the British, on the other hand, had gold and silver, and they paid for what they took or what they bargained for the most part, and they paid in silver and gold. If you're a farmer, hey, you got to feed your family, so it's interesting. There was that kind of a pull for farmers. They became worthless after May of 1781, ceased to circulate. There was a term, not worth a Continental. I remember hearing it when I was smaller, in my youth, many years ago, but you don't hear it much anymore. But not worth a Continental was a reference to the Continental currency. Okay, it was not a tax, but it was a price that people paid for our independence. I mean, we had to lose money. Somehow we gave goods and got nothing in return, but it's something that we had to do. The good part of it is all these things are now available for collectors like me. Okay, I love them. They're fantastic. They gave us, at the time of the revolution, they gave us high ideals to aspire to. They gave us encouragement. They acknowledged what the situation was, but promised a brighter day in many cases. So they really exhorted the citizens to to rally to the cause and be patient, and things would be better. So they truly were patriotism in print. So that's the end of my presentation. But before I go, I just want to mention two things. If you're interested in this series, Newman's book on Continental or on early paper money of America is an excellent source of knowledge for that. The Newman Numismatic Portal evidently has a lot of information, including kind of like an evolving book on colonial currency, which has Continental currency in it. So that's going to be added to and kept up to date rather than publish new books. So I encourage you to do that. Lastly, I just want to mention two people and acknowledge some help that I have here. Actually, three people. I just thought of it. Leanna's done an excellent job in helping us all, and we really appreciate that, especially us older people who aren't necessarily computer literate as some other people are. I want to thank Ray Williams for helping me out for reading my presentation, offering comments, some grammar things and everything else. And finally, I just want to say thanks to my wife. I really appreciate her. I would be doing the presentation. What does this look like? How does this look? Does this look good? Does that look good? What's the right word here? What's the right word there? So she helped me out on that. So with that, that's it. And thank you very much for listening. I appreciate it.
Okay, we do have a couple questions in the Q&A. If you could go ahead and stop your screen share, there's a little red button at the top of your screen that says stop share. should be able.
Me?
There we go. Okay, we had 2 questions come into the text Q&A from Bill Summers. What did you use for plates when you printed money at Colonial Williamsburg?
What did I use for plate? Oh, it was a plate design. It was actually a Virginia currency plate. It was designed by Eric Goldstein. It was not a real plate. They actually print money that they sell at gift shops. So he engraved the plate and we used that. So it was kind of fun, but it's not anything real.
Okay, and then we have a question from Doris. You mentioned that in 2017, a cast belonging to Benjamin Franklin was found. Can you tell us where it was found and if it can be seen somewhere today?
Okay, it's actually 2014. I meant to say, I don't know what I said, but 2014 it was found. It's actually is located in the Library Company of Philadelphia, which is a museum/research center in Philadelphia, and it is, I believe it is visible there today. It was discovered there and it resides there, so you can actually see it along with some other blocks or printing material from the Benjamin Franklin era. But there's definitely one on the nature prints.
Okay, looks like that wraps up the text Q&A for right now. If
Right.
anyone else in the audience has any questions, you can send them to the text Q&A. If you click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, you can type them. Or if you would like to come on and ask them live, you can raise your hand and then I will give you the opportunity to speak for a minute. So we've got, let's see, one more text and then one raised hand. Another one from Doris. I noticed very similar imagery on the notes to that of 18th century condor tokens, beehive and bees, scales, the tree, and the plow. Do we know who designed the notes?
These notes, the notes for the Continental currency were designed by a committee. I know Benjamin Franklin was one of them. There's 2 or 3 other people were with him, who had the basic designs. I just can't recall them, but I remember reading it. But Benjamin Franklin was definitely one of them. So, but some of these are also, taken from ancient times and so forth. It's not necessarily that these were original, like the justice with the scales and everything has been around for centuries and centuries. So there's things there, but no, there was a committee of, I think, 3 or 4 individuals, of which Ben Franklin was one of them. Okay.
Okay, let's see. We got a few hands up in the audience. So first up, we have Wayne Shelby. So Wayne, in the lower left-hand corner of your screen, you should see a little microphone that you can click to unmute yourself. There you go.
Okay. Hey, Leo.
Hey, how you doing?
Very good. I enjoyed your lecture.
Thank you.
Need a little more education on the paper money, and I found those vignettes very interesting. And what piqued me was, what do you think of the colonists? What percentage do you think of the colonists really understood those? Or is that something just the merchants or the upper class understood? Or I was just kind of wondering what you thought would be rambling on in your head about that.
I haven't thought about that, but now that you bring it up, I mean, there was so many illiterate people at the time that I would guess it was a small percentage, really, unless somebody explained it to them. They looked at the symbol. They couldn't read it, and they certainly couldn't read Latin. But
Right.
They maybe after somebody explained it to them, it actually hit them what it was. But I mean, I forget what the numbers are, but less than half the people could read. There were a lot of illiteracy, so I would say a very small percentage. But I haven't given it a lot of thought. But that's a good one. I'll have to think that more, Wayne. Thanks.
Yep, you're welcome.
All righty. Looks like that was the only hand up for right now.
Okay.
Put that one down. Okay, so go ahead and raise your hand if you have any questions. Otherwise, we have one more in the text Q&A from Tom Gessner. Did Ben Franklin play a role in selecting the vignettes or Latin phrases? I think we've talked about him to some extent. I guess the Latin phrases was the specific part of this one.
The Latin phrases. Okay. I would guess, because they were designed for the whole vignette. So I don't know that for sure, but I would guess if they were doing the symbols and everything in the vignettes, they would also do the Latin phrases. It has to go with them. Mm-hmm. So I would guess that's part of it, but I have not specifically heard anything that would indicate they were separate or whatever. So I would say yes, that committee had a lot to do with it. And Ben
Alrighty.
Franklin knew everything. So, I mean, he just,
Okay, we did have one more hand come up. So Pam, you can now unmute yourself. You should find the microphone in the lower left. Yeah.
Hi, this is Pam's husband, Joe. We're talking about where the vignettes came from. Basically, if you look at Newman, the argument Newman was that the early vignettes were taken from a book of emblems by a guy named Camarines in the 17th century. This probably included the mottos also, the Latin mottos. But what's interesting about the later vignettes, the ones used in 1779, is Francis Hopkinson, who signed the Declaration of Independence, helped design the later vignettes. And when he went to get paid for them, Congress wouldn't pay him. So he ended up getting less money than he thought he was owed, because they said, well, you know, but designing the vignettes was part of your job.
okay. You know what, you're right. I did actually read that somewhere and it slipped my mind, but yes, I do remember hearing that. Yes. Thank you.
Okay, then I believe that wraps up all the questions we have. So thank you very much, Leo, for a very interesting presentation. And thank you for everyone who has attended today and throughout the convention. I believe there are plans to have kind of a general member meeting in the next week or so. So keep an eye out for more information about that. And yes, I think this has gone very well for our first attempt at a virtual C4 convention. So thank you all for bearing with us and figuring out Zoom along the way.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Have a good afternoon.
Also, yep.